The grotto was circular in shape. Small doors with windows were put in. The wooden interior was painted with oil paints, and the emperor often came to sit there. Fish were planted in the basins, but several died. With a lead pipe coming from the main reservoir, we created a small fountain in the center basin. Chandelier, the head cook, had been put in charge of that use and had succeeded perfectly. It was only put in use when the emperor went out. All these details will appear futile, but they show, on the part of those who shared the emperor's captivity, with their desire to ease the bitterness. A smile of satisfaction from the emperor was the only reward they sought. The emperor did not seem interested in the new modifications. The paths were finished everywhere. The flower beds had been established, and the various patches had been seeded. Already the emperor saw with pleasure peas and string beans sprouting from the ground, when one morning, going out of his apartment in his bathrobe, he noticed 5 or 6 hens scratching in his vegetable patches. He had instructed me to tell those who owned chickens to keep them shut away, because he had already noticed a few of them wandering through his garden. The order had been promptly executed, but the chickens had escaped the surveillance of the cook, who was raising and selling them to the household supplier. Maddened by the damage he was witnessing, the emperor immediately came back in, called Saint-Denis, and asked him for his shotguns, took one, and went outside saying, "That is too impertinent." Saint-Denis and I followed the emperor. The poor chickens continued during their damage, not suspecting that lead was about to put an end to it. They were close together. Aim was taken. 3 fell with 1 shot. The others flew away, and a 4th was hit with the 2nd shot on the wall where it was perched. "Pick up my game," he said to Saint-Denis. "Take it to the kitchen and have a fine soup made for me with it." Then, turning to me, "I forbid you to pay for them," he said, "no matter who the owner is." It so happened that they belonged to the cook, who was careful not to complain and found a way to lose nothing by offering a good chicken broth. A shot fired so close to the house had brought everyone outside. Those who owned hens were considered to have been warned, and no more chickens were seen. They were the first shots the emperor had fired for a long time, and made him regret the absence of game that did not allow him to the exercise of hunting. There were some turtle doves, but they went from one valley to another, and it was necessary to cover a lot of ground to follow them. One day, when some landed not far from him, he sent for his shotgun, but they had already disappeared before it arrived. A few days later, a goat and some kids belonging to Archambault were grazing on the lawn some 50 or 60 paces from the house. The mother was tied up, and the young ones were jumping around her. They were doing no harm, but the emperor wanted to prove his skill. He had Saint-Denis load his shotgun with ammunition, aimed at one of the kids, and broke its shoulder. The mother and the second kid lifted their heads, not knowing where the shot came from. The emperor was about to aim at the second one when he said, "He is still conscious. The shot is too easy. Carry the wounded one to the kitchen." For several weeks, he had Archambault buy a few young kids, which he rarely missed from some distance. On this occasion, the emperor said to General Montholon that in his youth, he was always complaining about the numerous goats in Corsica that caused much damage to the property, and particularly to the young trees they would attack. I was always in favor of destroying them, and I had tremendous arguments with my old uncle, the archdeacon, who owned many of them. One day, when he had reached the peak of his furor, he accused me of being an upstart. One afternoon, when he was strolling with the emperor before dinner, Count de Montholon came to fetch one of the emperor's shotguns and had Saint-Denis follow him with the other. It was to shoot a small suckling pig that had wandered away from a drove led by its mother. He was too far away to suppose the young animal would have anything to fear. "Montholon, my son," said the emperor, who handed him the shotgun, "I'm going to offer you a roast worthy of Ulysses for your dinner." He aimed and shot the pig dead. The animal was immediately prepared and appeared at the dinner table. It had been shot right through the head. The last shot fired by the emperor was at an ox belonging to the East India Company that had entered the compound from the vegetable garden and was eating everything in it. It already happened that these animals had spoiled everything while roaming, and complaints had been made to the captain. The emperor saw nothing better to do with the ox than he had done with the chickens. The ox was turned so as to receive the shot between its 2 horns. He aimed, and the animal fell dead. It was a plow ox belonging to the company. Its loss served as an example, and oxen and chicken no longer appeared. The youngest of Count Bertrand's children, Arthur, had come to fetch the shotgun with Count de Montholon. He was so frightened at seeing this enormous animal fall under the impact of the shot that he threw himself between the emperor's legs, not wanting to turn his head toward the ox. The emperor often referred to that child's fright, and when he saw him, he would say, "Well, Arthur, what about the ox?" The soil in the gardens did not always respond to the effort expended there. The caterpillars were devastating and would cause much damage in a single night. Vegetables nevertheless grew in the garden and ended up on the emperor's table, and he never failed to ask if they came from his garden. Generally speaking, they were affected by the dryness of the climate, the drought, and also the iron content of the ground in which they grew. The peas were hard, as were the string beans. The cauliflower would not form properly, while cabbage did rather well, but what came from town was not any better. The peach trees we had transplanted bore fruit that same year. The emperor ate some of them, as well as a few strawberries. The strawberry plants were covered with flowers, but bore very little fruit. The emperor sometimes entertained himself counting the number of beans in a row to see what would be yielded. We had finally succeeded in arranging some shade for the emperor close to the house. A bower 40 feet long was covered in 3 months' time with passion leaves and became impenetrable to the rays of the sun. The vegetation is luxurious in this climate, where excessive heat during the day is replaced during the night by abundant dew. Once the gardens were completed, we kept only 2 Chinese servants out of the 4 that had been hired at the beginning of the work. The emperor sometimes amused himself watching them work, and as he had noticed that his presence would prompt them to work harder than usual, he one day asked that a bottle of wine be given to them. Instead of handing it over as a present from the emperor, the man who brought it threw it on the ground, saying, "Hey, Chinamen." The emperor was present and expressed his dissatisfaction to the man who had behaved like this. "It takes away the value of the object to give it with as little consideration as you did." Among the Chinese, there was one on the island who sculpted with great taste and was a carpenter by trade. The emperor expressed the wish that Monsieur de Montsalon have him build a Chinese kiosk in the corner of the garden, which he himself designated in the corner and at the same height as the berm, so that he could see the ocean from that point and retire there from time to time. When it was built, it was decorated inside with white muslin and was furnished with a Chinese armchair, some stools, and a small table. From there, the emperor could see the ocean and part of the panorama surrounding Longwood. He went there a few times, then never returned again. When the Grand Marshal asked him why he did not make more use of his kiosk, he answered, "I had to climb up, and I can no longer do that. I had it built only to distract Montsalon." One day, as the emperor was returning to his apartment to go to bed, Count Montsalon was present, and the emperor asked me to tell him the story of the Englishwoman who wished so much to see him at the Élysée after his return from Waterloo and had fixed meeting place in Saint-Philippe du Roule. I told him the story as can be seen in the chapter on the 100 Days. Well, Montsalon, what do you think of that? "But, sire, I believe she was quite wrong. If it was a love affair, not to come and pursue it here. No doubt you are now a widower, sire, and your majesty will allow me to tell him that I am not thinking of myself." "Ah, my son," said the emperor, "when you are past 50 and in my state of health, it is no longer worth the trouble." The first thing the emperor looked at in a woman were her hands and feet. If both were unattractive, he would say, "She has rogue swatters." He said on this subject that Empress Marie-Louise was beautifully made, that she had charming hands and feet. When I went to meet her, it was the first thing that struck me. She was fresh as a rose and without any coquetry. She differed in that respect from Josephine, who had much. On learning of the Duke of Berry's assassination, the emperor blamed that prince for having gone to the opera for the purpose as futile as the one that took him there. But there's a destiny one cannot escape, he said. When the French newspapers later announced the birth of the Duchess of Berry's baby, the emperor said to Count Montsalon, "Read this report and tell me if you could possibly write one more stupid or more inclined to give the impression that the child is not his. How can such a high-ranking princess find herself abandoned to the point of having no one with her when she can expect to give birth at any moment?" When the empress was ready to give birth, the Duchess of Montebello remained 9 days without leaving the Tuileries. When the first labor pains were felt, it was 7 p.m. Dubois came down from the room where he was staying, and the empress spent the entire night in pain, having with her the Duchess of Montebello, Countess de Lucé, and Countess de Montesquieu, who was to be governors. The empress's ladies-in-waitings, the nurse, Corvassor, Boudier were there. My entire family was in the adjoining drawing room, and I went constantly back and forth between Marie-Louise and Madame, who was also there. As the night passed and I saw no sign that she was ready to give birth, I got into my bath at 5 a.m., leaving Dubois with her, along with her ladies and her household staff. We know the Empress was so tired she fell asleep, but soon new labor pains awakened her and increased without bringing on the final crisis required by nature. Dubois sent to notify the Emperor the birth was going to be difficult and dangerous. The Emperor got out of his bath to go encourage Marie-Louise by his presence and told Dubois, who didn't think he could save both mother and child, to think only of the mother and to treat her as a woman from Rue Saint-Denis. He entered the Empress's bedroom, kissed her tenderly, and urged her to be courageous and patient. Corvisart, Boudier, and Yvon came in at that moment and held Marie-Louise as the baby was presenting himself feet first. They had to use forceps to bring out the head. That labor lasted 26 minutes and was most painful. The Emperor could not take it anymore and went to sit in an adjoining dressing room to await the results. He was given news every minute. The child was finally born, but it gave no signs of life for 5 minutes. The Emperor ran to Marie-Louise, whom he again held in his arms, and had Cambaceres enter, who was, in his position of Arch-Chancellor, was required to verify the birth and sex of the child. Berthier was also there and also came in. All of the Emperor's attention was directed towards the Empress, and he believed his child was dead. Then he heard a cry that announced the contrary. He ran to embrace him and brought him to the Empress, who felt far too weak to share his happiness. Well, said the Emperor, in spite of all the people surrounding her, the rumor circulated that the Empress had given birth to a daughter for whom a boy had been substituted. Other people said the child was stillborn, or that she had never been pregnant. The most absurd rumors. What will they say about the delivery of the Duchess of Berry, when that of Marie-Louise, which occurred among 30 people, was suspect? This one took place without any important person of the court, such as the Duke of Orleans or others. Among his snuff boxes, the Emperor had a portrait of Empress Josephine, which he did not consider a good likeness. Countess Bertrand had one decorated with pearls that this princess had given her. It had been painted by Saint, and it was a very good likeness. The Emperor asked her for it and told me to make a copy. I thought this was a joke and protested, but the Emperor was serious. I showed much good intention if I was lacking in talent. I had learned a little how to draw figures, landscapes, and architecture. I painted a little, but regardless, I was not capable of undertaking the copy of a portrait by Saint. I took a gamble and set to work, and luck helped me beyond my greatest hopes. When I showed it to him, the Emperor found it a very good likeness. He had me frame it and then hung it on one side of his mantelpiece, where it remained until his death. Whenever Countess Bertrand came to inspect the progress of our work, as soon as the Emperor saw her, he never failed to go and greet her, offered her his arm, walk her about, and pick her a rose, if he spotted one that was sufficiently beautiful and worthy of being offered to her. During one of these visits, the Emperor told me to bring him the remaining snuff box decorated with his portrait. It was surrounded by very handsome diamonds and was identical to the one he had given Countess de Montauban before she left Longwood. The Emperor was in the billiard room, and I presented the snuff box on a gilt tray. He took it, opened the leather box, and held it, and said, "Here, madame, I'm giving it to you at this very sad time, but it will be a token of my esteem and my friendship." The Countess thanked the Emperor with a grace that showed how flattered she was by the present he had given her, and how much she appreciated it. No one was more gracious than that lady when she wished to be. To a great deal of distinction, she added a charming appearance, and often revealed a foot that was very handsome, as were those of all her children. At that time, the Emperor was in fairly good health. I am pleased to be able to record a few moments spent beguiling his captivity. During one of these mornings, as he was having lunch under his oak tree in the company of Count de Montauban, he amused himself watching the Grand Marshal's children playing in the distance, and had them called over. A city resident had come to Longwood riding a small pony, and Arthur, the youngest of the children, having seen it, asked the Emperor to buy it for him. As he spoke only English, the Emperor told him in that tongue, "Come at noon." But as was his habit, he went back inside, leaving the children to continue their games, got undressed, and soon fell asleep. I was leaving the Emperor's bedroom quietly when the fort cannon announced the hour of noon, and in the bathroom I found young Arthur fighting with Novaras to enter the Emperor's bedroom. I feared my refusal would make him cry and awaken His Majesty. I therefore made him understand that the Emperor was sleeping, and if he agreed to be good, I would let him enter and wait for His Majesty to awaken. "Yes," he answered. I took him by the hand. He went near the bed where the emperor was resting, saw he was sleeping, then sat on the rug and stayed with me almost an hour, playing alone and noiselessly. When the emperor awoke, he was quite surprised to find him there. "Are you there, Arthur? What do you want, my boy?" "You tell me gunfire." I was not aware of the promise made to him. "What does he say?" the emperor asked. "He is telling your majesty that he told him to come back when the gun went off. Take him to Montholon to find out what he wants." At that very moment, Count de Montholon was announced at the emperor's bedroom. He learned that during lunch he had been told the child to come at noon, and he would buy him the little pony. Gunfire was the cannon announcing that hour, and he came to claim the promise made to him. "Indeed, what a memory," said the emperor. "Is the horse still there?" Count de Montholon, who had discussed the price with the owner, assured him it was. "But," said the emperor, caressing the child and embracing him, "do you have any money?" "Yes, I have $2. "That is not enough. Papa give you everything." "But Papa Bertrand has no money." "I have plenty gold." "Will you be good?" "Yes." "How much does he want for this horse?" the emperor asked General Montholon. 50 louis, 1,000 francs, sire." "Give this big boy 1,200 francs, the emperor said to me. I went upstairs to get the money that was locked up in a bag. The child was 4 years old, and on seeing me arrive, he held out his pinafore to catch the money. "You won't be able to carry it." Yes. I put the money gently in his pinafore to test his strength. He turned rapidly, and accompanied by Count de Montholon, he went to purchase the horse he wished to buy. Riding his horse and held up by Count de Montholon, he came back almost immediately to the emperor's door to thank his majesty. Later on, having fallen from the horse, he no longer wanted it and switched back to his burro, a much quieter mount and more responsive to his wishes. The horse was given to Napoleon Bertrand, the eldest of the children, who sometimes accompanied the emperor when his mother rode in the carriage with him. The emperor was very fond of children, and there was nothing he wouldn't do to please them. Never did Count Bertrand or Count de Montholon's children leave him without taking with him some memento of his affection and munificence. He had some jewelry bought in town to give them, and very much enjoyed watching their pleasure. The emperor one day told Count de Montholon to bring in his little Napoleone, today Countess La Perouse. He was in bed when the child was brought and asked me to bring him a few gold chains from China. He spread them out in front of her, believing that she would not know the difference between the prettiest and less pretty. But to his great surprise, after having looked at them one after the other, she chose the prettiest. The emperor did not limit his generosity to the children. The parents also received their share. On New Year's Day, the emperor gave the children double Napoleons, and the ladies each received a plate from his Sèvres porcelain service, representing some historical scene. Countess Bertrand received one, which depicted the passage of the Danube, whose bridges had brought the general fame. The gentlemen were not forgotten either. They either received several presents from the emperor. Countess Casas received a small campaign travel kit and a pair of spurs worn by the emperor. Count de Montholon, his travel kit from the Egyptian campaign. General Gourgaud, a cross of the Legion of Honor, and the Grand Marshal, a gold watch. "Here, Bertrand," said the emperor, "it's striking 2 a.m. at Rivoli, when I gave Joubert the order to attack. We had brought from Paris a very fine Sèvres porcelain service for the emperor's use. Each dozen was enclosed in lined leather cases. A magnificent set of 24 cups and accessories were enclosed in a similar case, and 2 vases from the same manufacturer. The emperor only used this to make presents. Each piece represented some view of a battlefield or a major city. One day, while looking at them with Count de Montholon, the emperor paused in front of the one representing the city of Ajaccio. At the moment, the frigate Muron was dropping anchor in the harbor. General Bonaparte was on board returning from Egypt. "There you are, Montholon. Here's my house," he said. "I am sure that rowboat next to the frigate is my wet nurse's." The poor woman was one of the first to come and see me. The town was under the control of a few gang leaders who were very much disappointed when I arrived. Complete confusion prevailed. The municipality accused the parliament accused the magistrates. Nevertheless, everyone wanted to see the famous Napoleon. The entire population lined the shore, and the garrison, quite spontaneously, had placed itself under arms and formed a double row up to my house. The health service assembled under the presidency of a certain Barberi, one of my former comrades, was opposed to our landing. Barberi himself came to express his regrets, and crossing the line of boats that already surrounded us, he came on board to congratulate me on my victories and return. Those who accompanied him followed, so that communication was established without my intervention. There was, in fact, no danger, as none of us had any disease. As I was anxious to go ashore, I accepted the offer made to me, and few citizens have been received with greater enthusiasm than I was by my compatriots. I passed the garrison in review. The poor men were very badly dressed, for they had not received any pay for 7 or 8 months. I took 40,000 francs from my mother's holdings to bring their pay up to date.